We'll start in just a couple minutes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. All right. All right. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وقربه وثوابه. Bismillah. It's good to see some familiar faces again. And we'll just start the reflections so as to try to maintain some sort of connection to the advertised time. Although I know that for the students, you're just getting out of class, I think at 1. So I wanted to give a couple minutes. I want to kind of focus most of what I have to say today around one hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is wherein it is narrated that كان الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا دخل في رجب كان يقول اللهم بارك لنا في رجب وشعبان وبلغنا رمضان. That it's said about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when the month of Rajab would come, the month before this one, then he would make the following dua. He would say, "O Allah, bless us in Rajab and bless us in Sha'ban and allow us to reach the month of Ramadan and help us to reach the month of Ramadan or take us to the month of Ramadan." So I want to focus kind of just the brief reflections today around this because we are getting extraordinarily close to the month of Ramadan now, about 2 weeks away. And to take just a few points from this. So one of them is that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that different times and places have different merits, that not all times and places are equal in a sense. That doesn't mean that we don't take all of them seriously, but it means that some of them have special merit. And amongst those times that have special merit are, for example, the month of Rajab, which is from Ashhur al-Hurum, it's from the sacred months. And the month of Sha'ban has extra merit, largely because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to fast a lot in this month. Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that there's not really any month that she would see the Prophet ﷺ fasting as much as she saw him fasting in the month of Sha'ban. And of course, the month of Ramadan has its own special merit, being as that it is the month wherein the revelation of the Quran began to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's think about this hadith a little bit, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Rajab would come, he would say, "Oh Allah, bless us in Rajab, bless us in Sha'ban, and help us to reach the month of Ramadan." So the first thing here is to recognize those varying merits. Okay, so the first thing is to recognize the ranks of different things. And when we recognize the ranks of different things, then we're able to put things in the appropriate place. So we're able to put, for example, the Prophet ﷺ is entering Rajab. Now he has Rajab, he has Sha'ban, he has Ramadan in front of him. And he's able to put, because he understands the levels of these different things, he's able to put Ramadan at the top, which is to say that these 2 months, part of what we learned from the hadith is that in order to properly deal with something that has a high level of merit, we have to prepare ourselves. And this is a universal sunnah, it's a universal practice of life. There are rules that God has placed in the creation, and a lot of those are laid out for us in the examples of the Quran and in the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of those universal rules is that when something's important, you have to prepare for it. If you really want to deal with it properly, you have to prepare for something that's important. So the school example of that obviously will be a test. You know, if the test is coming up, or an assessment, if the assessment is coming up and the assessment has a level of merit to it, then in order to prepare oneself for the assessment, you have to prepare. You don't just show up on the day of the science fair. You don't just show up on the day of the science fair and put up a piece of cardboard and say, oh, this is my project. But there has to be some level of preparation. And as things get more and more serious in life, as we deal with bigger and bigger things, that preparation becomes more and more serious, right? So when we're in high school, we're trying to prepare ourselves to go to college. When we're in college, we're trying to prepare ourselves to go to either some sort of professional program or to enter into the workplace. When we want to get married, we try to prepare ourselves for that process of marriage. When we're going to have, if we're going to have children, we prepare ourselves for children. So all of these things have necessary preparation. And part of what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us in this hadith is that Ramadan is there and you should be preparing for it from advance, because this is something that's really important. And the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they used to spend several months before Ramadan in preparation for Ramadan. And maybe we did that, maybe we didn't. It's not really the point to guilt trip us on this at this point. The point is to remind ourselves that we still have 2 weeks. So one of the things, for example, that I would really encourage people to brush up on if they haven't been doing so, is to brush up on your reading of the Quran. And this is not only for the sake of being ready to read as much Quran as I can in Ramadan, but this is also for the sake of the fact that most likely we're going to be praying Taraweeh in our homes by ourselves. And if that's the case, then I'm going to take from the opinion that allows me to hold the Mus'haf in prayer, in Taraweeh, right? So I hold the Mus'haf in Taraweeh, I can read from the Mus'haf. But if I can't read the Arabic comfortably, then even being able to hold the Mus'haf is not going to help me very much. So if we don't know how to read at this point, it's probably a little bit late for that with 2 weeks left. But if we've learned in the past, then this is, it's a depreciating skill, in a sense that, like, reading the Quran is really easy when we're doing it all the time. If we step away from it for some time, then it might take a little bit of effort to get the reading back up to speed. So now is to prepare for that experience of probably leading our families or praying by ourselves in our homes, then that's a good thing to do. But he's teaching us to prepare by making dua that, oh Allah, bless us in Rajab, bless us in Sha'ban, and fasting a lot in the month of Sha'ban as he did. So this is the first point, is preparation. The second point is kind of recognizing that in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a recognition that nothing is really guaranteed. And this is a difficult truth for a lot of people to accept and swallow. And we are obviously right in front of it right now, but nothing is really guaranteed. And so he's coming to Rajab and he's not assuming, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he will reach Ramadan. It's not like guaranteed. And we always make this dua every single year. And in Ramadan, we make dua that we get to experience another Ramadan. And usually it's just kind of habit, But that dua of, oh Allah, allow us to reach Ramadan, help us to reach Ramadan, takes on a whole different meaning this year. Right? It takes on a whole different meaning now, because it's really right in front of us how fragile the whole thing is, about whether or not we'll be able to reach that. And we ask Allah to allow us to reach Ramadan. Then the other question that comes up is, related to that, is what is the big deal with Ramadan? I mean, like in the end, what is the big deal? And there's two major points here. There's two major points here that I think that, um, hopefully can orient us in a sense as we approach the month. The first thing is that the major thing about Ramadan actually is the revelation of the Quran. As Allah said in Surah Al-Baqarah, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم. That the month of Ramadan is the month wherein the Quran was revealed. Now, what is interesting about this is that from the practice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have a little bit of an indication that one of the ways that he would celebrate things, in a sense, if we're to use terms that people use now, one of the ways that he would celebrate things is to fast. So he says, for example, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that one of the reasons why he would fast on Mondays, he says, because it's yawmun wulidtu fi, that it's a day when I was born. So he's like, every Monday is his birthday, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on Mondays he would fast, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have now the month of Ramadan wherein the Quran is revealed, and the fasting is, in a sense, it's part of the celebration of the revealing of the Quran to humanity. That here now is the book of guidance. It's a book of guidance, and it's a book of detailed guidance, and it's a book that distinguishes truth from falsehood and clarifies what's right from what is wrong. And that is something to be really grateful for, because many of us, we go through life convinced that we're going to figure out for ourselves everything that's right and everything that's wrong. And usually, for someone who's like really honest, really sincere, really thoughtful, they can actually figure out a lot of what's right and what's wrong. But usually, if they're relying on figuring that out themselves, they're going to go through a lot of pain in the process. They're going to go through a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of difficulties. And then through those experiences, they'll forge for themselves an understanding of what is true and what is right. And a lot of that might actually be true and right. But part of what the prophets do for us, and part of what revelation does for us, is that it clarifies for us all of those questions. So I don't have to like figure out all of these things on my own. I have guidance for that in the revelation, and that's an incredible thing to be grateful for. And so when we're grateful for that, one of the ways that we express that is by witnessing the month of Ramadan and experiencing it in fasting. So two of the major things then that come out of Ramadan or in Ramadan are a relationship with the Quran and the act of fasting, which is meant to increase us in our awareness of God and our awareness of everything that's going on around us. So it's a deeply self-reflective practice, fasting. It's a deeply self-reflective practice. I'm supposed to look at myself. I'm supposed to think about myself. I'm supposed to spend time alone. I'm supposed to reflect upon my qualities and the things that I can improve upon and the things that I'm doing well and so on and so forth. All of this is part of that. And then I'm feeding that reflective process with the true guidance of the Quran, which is then influencing and inspiring how I'm going through all of that. So these are the two things that are coming together in the month of Ramadan. And then usually we do that collectively. As a community, we have our collective prayers and our fast breaking gatherings with our friends and our families and everything, our late night suhoor runs. We have all of these wonderful things that we usually do that are going to be different this year. And so, this all ties into hoping to reach the month of Ramadan. So there's two last points I'll make, is that when we talk about reaching the month of Ramadan and recognizing that it's going to be different this year, one of the things that I would encourage us to do is, and we're doing this in the classes, by the way, and inshallah we're going to send our conclusions to the families, which is to reflect upon what are those things that we really enjoyed about previous Ramadans. Was it all of these things that I mentioned? Was it other things? And then to look at that list and say, what from those things am I going to be able to do this year, most likely? And what from those things does it look like I'm not going to be able to do this year? And for those things that it looks like I'm not going to be able to do, let me think about what are alternatives. And that's, again, one of those things that we learn from our tradition is al-mashaqqa tajlibu at-taysir. That al-mashaqqa tajlibu at-taysir means that difficulty requires a facilitation. So now I'm faced with a new situation. What is something I can what is something else I can come up with? Maybe it won't be the same, but it'll still be something good, and I can have a good intention, and good will come from it, inshallah. That's one of the points. And the other thing is to recognize, why is it then that Ramadan is so important other than these things? And very simply, it's related to the statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's three major hadith, or four, I guess, maybe, that come up in this regard. And three of them are very much related. من صام رمضان ومن قام رمضان ومن قام ليلة القدر. All of them in the different narrations. غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. The one who fasts in Ramadan, the one who stands in Ramadan, meaning they're praying in the night, and the one who stands, prays in the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. All of those groups of people, they're forgiven of their previous sins. Just as a clarification, this doesn't mean you can like kill someone and then fast in Ramadan and everything's fine. This is outside of the major things that you have to take up with the person that you've wronged. You have to take it up with the person that you've wronged. You don't just get like a free pass on that. But generally, like, there's mistakes that we make, and those things are all forgiven in the month of Ramadan. And then the last hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in that regard is that in the month of Ramadan, the doors of paradise are opened and the doors of punishment are closed. And so this is why it matters. This is why it matters that we can go into this month. It's a special time of closeness, of proximity, of worship, which we can still do those things. Yes, we're going to miss the support of our friends and our families. It won't be in the same way, and so on and so forth. But really, Ramadan is about us and our Lord. And it can still be about us and our Lord. And we can still do that worship. We can still do that fasting. We can still enter the month the way that we enter it and leave it completely different, and leave it with our sins forgiven, our shortcomings forgiven. It can still be a month of transformation and all of those things, even if the circumstances are going to be different. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us blessings in the month of Sha'ban, and to allow us to reach the month of Ramadan for us and our loved ones and our families and our friends and everyone in the world. We ask Allah to give healing and shifa to all of those who are ill, and to protect all of those who are struggling with this illness or struggling in serving people in the face of this illness. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. There's a question here in the chat box. It says, in regards to prioritizing Quran activities in Ramadan, is there a better choice to make between reading the Quran in Arabic and finishing it, or using the study Quran and go in depth to understand more specific parts of the Quran? We got to learn about study Quran book recently. Yes. Each of these things has its merits. I would just very roughly and briefly say, from like the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk," that commit yourself to that which benefits you. So if you find that reading the Quran in Arabic is benefiting you, then alhamdulillah, read the Quran in Arabic. If you're finding that you feel like you need to spend some time really understanding some certain passages, then take some time and understand some certain passages. That's all good. But the thing that I would say though is that we always want to combine between various elements of our relationship with God, and those elements are the intellectual and the devotional, spiritual and devotional, and the just physical order of the world type things. So one of the things that can happen is if we put a whole lot of emphasis into the study portion of it, study Quran portion of it, we may neglect the devotional side of it, and Ramadan is also a time of devotion. So just try to maybe consider that. But in the end, whatever is beneficial to the person in their own relationship with God, then Bismillah, go for it. And recognizing that, I think one of the big things is that we shouldn't prop up these like really complicated and sophisticated ideals that we have to live up to. Otherwise, we're not doing Ramadan right, especially in these circumstances that we're in right now. We should do whatever it is that's going to fulfill, obviously, the fasting, do what we can from the night prayer and whatever. But in the end, like, if I don't do this, I wasn't good in Ramadan and this and that. Don't do all of that stuff. Just Whatever I can do in my relationship with God, I'm going to put that forward, and that's between me and my Lord. And I'm not going to do this whole like internal guilt tripping thing to push me to do more and all of this kind of stuff. Just whatever I can do, let me do it and let me enjoy it. And inshallah, may it be a blessed month for all of us. Is it allowed to fast after the middle of Sha'ban? There's a lot of conversation on this amongst the people of knowledge. So essentially, again, there's a lot of difference of opinion. It's hard to summarize it in any sort of meaningful way, but I'll try. Essentially, there are some narrations that indicate that one should not. Many of the people have understood this to mean basically that a person doesn't want to wear themselves out before Ramadan. Now, if a person is really used to fasting, maybe they fast every Monday and Thursday, maybe they fast the 3 white days, maybe that's just normal for them. So if they fast those days after the middle of Sha'ban, it's not really a big issue because they're used to fasting anyways. But if someone hasn't really fasted at all most of the year outside of Ramadan, and they're like, oh, it's Sha'ban and I need to get it in now, and they're like, oh no, there's 10 days before Ramadan, I'm going to fast 7 of these, it might not be like really that good of an idea. It's okay to pace ourselves. It's okay to take it easy a little bit, especially before the month comes. And they are still long days. We're still in a time of the year where these are long days. So we don't want to wear ourselves out. In the case of the Prophet ﷺ, he's narrated to have spent a lot of time fasting in in Sha'ban, but he also spent a lot of time fasting, period, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's not really the same kind of scenario. What if someone has days to make up from last year? They should, try to get them in, but ideally you get them in before now. But if you haven't gotten them in, try to get them in. And but don't, again, I think still the principle of not wearing oneself out is important. And there's, some debate on, in some of the schools, you're supposed to try to make it up before the next Ramadan. If you don't, though, you just make it up outside after Ramadan, right? So after Ramadan, we try to do better and make them up earlier. Should we fast if there is a lockdown? Yes, you should. What is the best time to do Qiyam al-Layl after Isha, middle of the night, before Fajr, etc. during Ramadan? Again, I would say the best time to do your Qiyam al-Layl is when you can do it and when you will realistically do it. So if that means you get it in right after Isha, you get it in right after Isha. If that means you wake up before Fajr and do it, you wake up before Fajr and do it. Generally, like if you're going to be okay with either way, then before Fajr is a good time. The last third of the night is a good time to pray those extra prayers. And that's that. Can you pray Taraweeh at home during lockdown? You can pray Taraweeh at home anytime, actually. And some of the opinions of the scholars is that it's better to do it at home anyways for the person who's capable of doing it, as long as it doesn't get neglected on a community level. So it's good for the community to do Taraweeh. And if someone wants to pray at home, they're okay praying at home. To be quite honest with you, after I'm not working in a masjid anymore, I very much prefer and often do pray my Taraweeh at home. It just works out easier for me and better for me with everything that is going on. How will we do Eid prayers? Well, we have a couple weeks, inshallah, to figure that out. If we can't congregate, we can't congregate. That means we're not going to do Eid prayer, which, is sad, but we're grateful that Allah has given us a religion and a way of worshiping Him that is adaptive to all kinds of different situations. And none of these things are the things that we actually worship in reality. We don't actually worship the 5 prayers. We don't actually worship Taraweeh. We don't actually worship Jummah. We don't actually worship Eid. We worship God. And we worship Him in the way that He asked us to worship Him and in accordance with what is acceptable. And if it's not safe for us to congregate for Eid prayer, then it's not safe for us to congregate for Eid prayer. and we'll have to look into it. There might be some opinions that might allow people like in their families to pray at home by themselves, just 2 rak'ah Eid. And we can talk about that, inshallah, when the time comes. And if not, then if not, it's not. It is what it is. Alhamdulillah. Should we designate a place at home as a home masjid? Yes, absolutely. At least in the Hanafi school, in general, especially for women, it's recommended for them to have a place in their home where they pray, and it's also recommended for men as well, and for that to be a set place. And one of the interesting things actually in the Hanafi school is that it says that for i'tikaf, when we go in the masjid and we intend to stay there and worship God, that you can do that at any time of the year for as long as you want. So you can go into the masjid for like half an hour and say, I'm intending right now that this is going to be an act of seclusion in the masjid to worship God. That for men, they have to do that in the masjid. But for women, they can do it in the masjid, or they can do it in the masjid of their bayt. They can do it in the masjid of their house. So they have like a corner of their room maybe that they pray in. They could go to that corner and say, I'm intending to seclude myself for the worship of God for this 15 minutes and make actual i'tikaf, like it's considered i'tikaf, which is amazing. Like you could do that anytime if you're a woman. My hope is that such a situation would apply to men right now too. So we can go to the masjid of our house, whatever spot that might be. It doesn't have to be like a full room or something. It can just be a corner, and make that the place that we pray, and make that the place that we worship and spend our time there. And sometimes I'll make an intention that I want to go here and seclude myself and focus on God for maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it might be, and then move on. So it's very, very important and good to have a place in the home that is your masjid of the home, so to speak, a place where you pray in your home. طيب, inshallah, we'll stop here so that the questions we can always take questions next week too, inshallah, and any other time. Feel free to email me or reach out with any questions that you ever have, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum, subhanakum bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, wal 'asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Barakallahu fikum, may Allah keep all of us safe and our families safe and our loved ones safe. Allahumma ameen. And now is a good time maybe to pray Dhuhr, like as a family, and come together in that way. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum.